Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mr. Molale from Ikailelo Secondary School. I'm the departmental head there. And also I am a senior marker for Life Sciences Paper 2. So for today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to focus on the theories of evolution. So it's important that you familiarize yourself with the examination guideline. I do believe you all have the examination guideline, right? If you don't have the examination guideline, please do ensure that your teachers in your respective schools, they do provide you with the examination guideline. If not, I will give it to Mr. Hrobla and then he will post it in the group. Ne? So the first theory that we are going to look at is Lamarckism. And under this law, under the theory of Lamarckism, we have the two laws that we must focus on. The first law is the law of use and disuse. And then the second law is the law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. Now, what does this mean to us? So the theory of law and disuse, it says that there are changes in the environment that creates the new needs that causes organisms to modify their existence. So the repeated use of the organ would cause it to do what? To enlarge and become more efficient. So now, for this one, it is for the law of use. Ne? When you use an organ, it would enlarge and it becomes more efficient. Then for the law of disuse, it says that if an organ is not used, it causes that particular organ to degenerate and later to disappear. So whenever you are given a question on Lamarckism, it's important to identify if whether the question is talking about the law of use or the law of disuse. It is never both, ne? Either the law of use or the law of disuse. After talking about the law of use or disuse, you have to mention what happens to the characteristic that is now acquired. So law of inheritance, it says that that modification, the change that occur in that particular organism, should that particular organism organ disappear, it now becomes an acquired what characteristic because an organism did not use that particular organ. So that particular characteristic, it becomes acquired and it is now passed toward to the offsprings. So this is just what? This is just the law of use and disuse and the law of inheritance according to Lamarck. Now let us look at the law. What does it say? Now, whenever you are given an example, it is important that your answer has what? It has this following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. Ne? You need to tell us the original characteristics at the start. You also need to tell us what did that particular organism do and why did it do this and what was the results, what happened to this new characteristic and what was the result of this particular characteristic. Example is we explain according to Lamarck how giraffes now have what? Long necks. Ne? Remember the law of use or disuse and the inheritance of the acquired characteristics. Now, I want to ask, according to this question, are we going to focus on the use or the disuse? if we say, why do giraffes now have long necks? Is it addressing the law of use or disuse? It's the law of use. Again. So now, when we explain why giraffes have long necks, it is important that remember the 6 points that must be addressed. Ne? You must state that all. Please make sure that you include that all. So it says all giraffes had what? Short necks originally. You know what I love about this law of Lamarck? Ne? If you are a learner, you cannot miss the mark of the first bullet and the last bullet. Why am I saying that? If they say, why do giraffes have long necks? Your opening statement, it must be the opposite of why the now characteristics. I don't know if I'm making sense, guys. Ne? It is asking, why do giraffes have what? Long necks. So your opening statement would be what? All giraffes had what? Short necks originally. Meaning, another example, explain why do snakes not have what? Legs, ne? Why don't they have what? Legs. What will be your opening statement? All snakes had what? Legs original. And then the last bullet would be the characteristic that they mentioned on the what? On the question. So now let us look at this one of why do giraffes have long necks. So you will state that all giraffes had short necks originally. What did the organism do? They frequently did what? Stretched their necks. Why did giraffes stretch their necks? It's because they wanted to reach for what? For the leaves at the top of the water of the trees in order for them to feed again. And then what was the results? Is that their necks became how? Their necks became longer. And then now you must state, because you said that the necks become how? Longer. So now the next bullet must mention that now long necks become a what? And an acquired characteristic. And then in this way, it is the one that will be passed to the next generation. And then now all giraffes would have what? Long necks. Remember, I mentioned the first bullet and the last bullet. Ne? You can never get those statements wrong when you answer your question. So that 2 marks is definitely guaranteed. Is it clear, ladies and gentlemen? So let us look at another example, because it's important that we familiarize ourselves with examples. I have an application example on Lamarckism. It says, insects on an island without trees are likely to be wingless because flying is dangerous for them in an area with what? Strong winds. In an area with strong winds. Now, a certain island was one covered with tall trees. Over the years, there has been deforestation in some areas of the island. On this island, insects called stoneflies have undergone natural selection. Some have wings and some do not have wings, depending on the area where they are found. Now, the diagram below shows stoneflies with and without wings. Now, according to Lamarck, we must explain why do stoneflies not have what? Wings. Remember the 6 what? The 6 points again. we are going to state the original state of the characteristics. Remember, it does not have what? Wings. I said the opening statement, we can't get it wrong. Again. And then the next bullet would be, what did the organism do? The third point would be, why? What was the result? What happened to the acquired characteristic? And now, what characteristic do we have? Can we attempt this question? Ne? Can we go through it, all of us? What would be the number one? Bullet number one would be, all stoneflies had wings. That's correct. Originally. Do not forget that originally. Ne? Your opening statement must have all and it must have originally at the end. Ne? So it's all stoneflies had wings original. Again, bullet number two, what did the organism do? What did stoneflies do? They walked. So if they walked, it means that they stopped using their wings. Again, why? Remember, we answer according to the question. Why? Because of strong winds. Strong winds are going to do what to the wings if they fly? Their wings will be destroyed. Again, so they stopped using their wings. Then what happened? What was the result? The wings did what? Disappeared. The wings disappeared. Now, what is the acquired characteristic? No wings. Again, and then no wings becomes what? The acquired characteristic, which is passed to the offsprings. And then the last bullet would be, now all what? Stoneflies do not have wings. Do you think, Remonat? Okay, let's check if we did get it right. It says, describe how Lamarck would have explained the evolution of stoneflies without what? Wings in the area without what? Trees. So what was the original state? All stoneflies had what? Wings originally, and we got that correct. Ne? Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Then, what was the challenge? What did the organism do? They stopped using their wings. They stopped using their wings, or they stopped what? Flying. Again, why? Due to what? Due to strong winds. I'm glad we did not say due to deforestation. It has nothing to do with them not using their winds. It is because of their strong winds. And then what was the result? Their wings became smaller, or it disappeared again. And then what happened to this new characteristic? We have to mention that the acquired characteristic of no wings, it is the one that is passed on to the offspring. And then now what is the result? All offsprings in the next generation had no what? No wings. So ladies and gentlemen, what does this mean? It means you must be able to explain any example that is given to you using the theory of Lamarck. You know, they can say, according to Lamarck, explain why do tigers have spots? According to Lamarck, why do elephants have a long what? A long trunk. So they can ask any question. So whenever that question is asked, remember these 6 what? These 6 points, they are the guide on how you should attempt to answer that particular question. Are we clear on Lamarck, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Now, back to the examination guideline, which is always the guide. after you have studied the theory of Lamarckism, we now know and how to explain the law of use and disuse and the law of inheritance of acquired characteristic again. Now, we must also know the reasons for Lamarck's theory to be how? Rejected. Do we know why it was rejected? Anyone? Why is the theory of Lamarck rejected? It's because, okay, let me assist you with that one. Remember, it talks of what? Acquired characteristics again. So now, the theory of Lamarck is rejected because acquired characteristics cannot be inherited. For example, I am dark in color. Ne? What is it that I'm going to do in order to gain complexion? I will start using the cream I give. And then I would acquire being yellow bone. I give. Does that mean that I'm going to pass my yellow bone to the child? No. What is it that is passed to the offspring? It is the DNA. Your DNA, it says that you are dark in complexion. So it is the one that you will pass to your what? To your offspring. Not the characteristic that you acquire throughout your lifetime. You want that child, with 6 packs and what? What is it that I'm going to do? According to Lamarck, I would go to the gym again. And then after that, I would acquire those characteristics again. So Lamarck is saying, after I acquire those characteristics, I am going to pass them to my offspring. Is that correct? Never. Good one. So the reason his theory was rejected is because acquired characteristics cannot be inherited, or they do not cause any change to the DNA of an organism's gametes. So is that clear, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. Then we move to the theory of Darwin. The theory of Darwin, which is Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. The theory of Darwin by natural selection. Now, when we look at this one, it says, before I actually go through this, I want you to know that you must first start by ensuring that you understand the general theory of Darwin. And then after understanding the general theory of Darwin, you must be able to use it in any example that is given. Now, what does that mean? You know the theory. So after knowing the theory, you must be able to apply the theory in an example if it is given. So a question can be asked in 2 ways for Darwinism or for natural selection. They can say, explain the theory of Darwin by natural selection. If the question is like that, it means we would expect you to answer it exactly as it is on the examination guideline. Exactly as it appears. If it just say, explain the theory of Darwin by natural selection, you use it, you write it exactly as it is from the examination guideline. But should the question say, explain why do we have giraffes with long necks? According to Darwin, you cannot write it like this. You will have to apply now. You will have to tell us there is a great deal of variation. So you state there the variation. There are giraffes with what? Short necks, and there are giraffes with what? Long necks. We can even do it using the example of stoneflies. Remember, from the previous question, there were stoneflies with what? With wings, and there were stoneflies without wings. Now I can say, explain why are there more stoneflies without what? Without wings. According to who? According to Darwin. So we must be able to apply it. So let us go through the general one. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important to ensure that when you talk about Darwinism, your opening statement, it must state that it is in a what? In a population. And within that population of giraffes, or the population of stoneflies, or the population of snakes, or the population of whatever example that will be given in the exam, there is a great deal of what? Variation amongst what? Amongst the offspring. So there are offsprings with favorable characteristics and some with unfavorable characteristics. Now, when there is change in the environmental condition, or if there is competition, so there can be change in the what? In the environment, such as the weather or the climate, which will lead to an organism to go to change. Or it can be due to what? Due to competition. And we must know, what is it that organism can compete for? Do we know what organism can compete for? They can compete for food, shelter, mating partners. I was looking forward to that. I know you would know that one. Yes. So we must be able to identify if whether it is the environmental condition or if there is what? Competition. So now what's going to happen? The environment changes. Remember, there are those with favorable and there are those without what? The favorable characteristics. Now, the organism with the favorable characteristics, it makes them more suited to do what? To survive. And then those with unfavorable, it makes them less suited and they do what? They would die. Now, after they survived, they must do what? They must reproduce. Mistake that is done at the end of the year. Learners, instead of writing they reproduce, they write they produce. So you are not going to be those learners. After they survive, they must do what? They must reproduce. And it is one mark for surviving and stating that they reproduce. Then the organism that survive, they reproduce, and thus they pass what? They pass the allele. Please note this. They pass the what? The allele for the what? For the favorable characteristic to their offspring. And then the next generation will therefore have what? A higher proportion of organisms with the favorable characteristic. Is it clear, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Now, let us look at the example of Darwin. Now, we make an example of what? The giraffes. Ne? Why do giraffes have what? Long necks, according to Darwin. So for this one, you must state the gene or the characteristic that varies. Ne? Remember the opening statement for the general, it says in a population, there is a great deal of variation in the or amongst the offspring. So you must also state when you answer that there is variation in the what? In the length of the necks of what? Of the giraffes. Then after stating that, you describe the variation by stating that there are giraffes with long necks and there are giraffes with short necks. And then you explain, which is difficult for most learners. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm going to ask you, what happens if they shoot you here on the lung or on the heart? What's going to happen? Explain. Majority of you say what? You die. Ne? You say that. Before you die, what happens? You cannot say an organism die or an organism survive without explaining why it dies and why it survives. Is it clear, ladies and gentlemen? Please do not just say, after describing the difference, there are giraffes with long necks and then there are giraffes with short necks, and then don't go and write those with short necks die and then those with long necks survive, and then that's it. You must explain why they survive. You must explain why they die. Then trust me, you will be allocated full marks. So why? Now, what is the environmental condition? We know that the food, giraffes, they feed at the top of the trees. Again, so it's now food is only available where? At the top of the what? Of the trees. So now natural selection must take place between giraffes with long necks and short necks because of where they get their what? Their food. So it means they would compete for what? They will compete for food. Now after that, you will state the unfavorable what? Characteristic after mentioning the environmental condition or the competition. You must state giraffes with short necks have what? An unfavorable characteristic, and then giraffes with long necks have a what? A favorable characteristic. Then after that, you explain why. So giraffes with short necks, they could not do what? They could not reach the top of the what? Of the trees. Again. So therefore, if they do not reach the top of the trees, it means no food, hunger, right? And therefore they do what? They die. So you see, before dying, you explained why. Again, they can't reach the food at the top of the trees, and therefore, because of hunger, they die. So for giraffes with long necks, you will state that they could get the food from the top of the trees because their necks were long, so they could not die. They could eat. So therefore, they survived. And after surviving, they do what? They reproduce. And after reproducing, they pass the allele forward. You see, it's highlighted. Ne? You are not going to say they pass long neck to their offspring. You must state that they pass the allele forward for long neck to their offspring. And then the next generation will have a higher proportion of giraffes with what? With long necks. So if you look at the general, here it just say it passed the allele again for the favorable. Again, when you do the application, you have identified the favorable characteristic. So you must mention it when you do the application. You are not just going to say they pass the allele of the favorable characteristic. You must mention what is that particular favorable characteristics. And then now, let us look at an example of Darwinism. So we have the one now. Can we do it for the stoneflies? Remember, we have stoneflies with wings, and we also have stoneflies without wings. Again. So now, remember, we must state there is a great deal of variation in the what? In the wings of the what? Of the stoneflies, or in the availability of wings, but we must know what characteristic varies. Again, for example, if I make another example, let's say in a desert, we have a mouse that is brown, and then we have a mouse that is white. If we state the variation, it would be there is a great deal of variation in the color of the fur of the. Do you get it? Laitolane. There is a great deal of variation in the color of the fur of the mice. And then after you describe the word, the variation, there are mice or mouse, but yeah, you know. A mouse with brown color fur, and there are mouse with what? White colored what? Fur. So you state and you describe. Do not forget that, ne? You state, after stating you describe the variation. So we can do it again. We said there is variation in the wings of the stoneflies. Again, when we describe it, we would say what? There are stoneflies with wings, and there are stoneflies without wings. Again. Now, after that, we must be able to do what now? The environmental condition. Again. What was the environmental condition? It was what? Strong winds. Again. So due to strong winds, those stoneflies, they had to undergo what? Natural selection. After stating the environmental condition, you now identify which one is the favorable characteristic and which one is the unfavorable characteristic. So between the two stoneflies, which one has the favorable characteristic? It's stoneflies without wings. Again. Yeah. And then those with unfavorable, it's stoneflies with wings. Now, after this, you are going to explain why is it favorable. Okay? You explain why no winds. With winds it's unfavorable. Again. And then without winds it's favorable. So we must state why. So stoneflies with winds, what's going to happen? When they fly, the strong winds are going to damage their wings, or maybe they will be blown away by the water, by the strong winds again, and then they do what? They die. Wawana, we did not just say they die. We explained why they die. Is it clear? And then what happened? They die again. Now you talk about the favorable, which is stoneflies without wings. What happens to those stoneflies? They are not flying again. It means they do not experience water, the strong winds. So they will not be blown away by the water, by the strong winds, and therefore they will survive. And then after surviving, they will pass the allele of what? No winds. Again, the allele of no winds to their offsprings. And then the next generation will have a high proportion of stoneflies without wings. Let us look at the application and check if whether we are on the right track. The wings of stoneflies, it is the characteristic. So there are stoneflies which have wings, and there are stoneflies that do not have wings. So deforestation took place and they experienced what? Strong winds. So stoneflies with wings is unfavorable. So it was dangerous for them to fly because of the strong winds. They were blown away and therefore they died. And then the allele, and then those without wings, it was favorable. They could not fly and they were not blown away by the water, by the strong winds, and then they survived. So after surviving, they did what? They reproduced, and then they passed the allele for no winds to the next generation, and then the next generation will have a high proportion of stoneflies without or with no winds. Is there a question on Darwinism? Yes, ma'am.
So is it necessary to say
Very necessary. Very necessary. Because remember, in a population, there is what? There is variation. There are stoneflies without wings, and there are stoneflies with wings. So within that population, when natural selection occurs, there will still be stoneflies with wings, and there will still be stoneflies without wings. But there will be a higher proportion of those with the what? With the favorable characteristic. So that higher proportion is very, very, very important. Is there another question? And please, let us not forget to state that they pass the what? The allele for the favorable characteristic, the one that you have identified. Is it clear, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Thank you. Now we move to punctuated equilibrium, which is the second last theory that we are going to look at. If we can just move to the board, I quickly need to show you something. When you explain this, so if you look at that graph there, you will see that where there was equilibrium, it's longer. Ne? So it means that it is a period whereby organism, they experience no change or there is little change. So you must know that that period, it's a longer what? It's a long period during punctuated equilibria. And then when you see the change there, you will see the period is very short and the graph is a bit how steep. Ne? So it shows that the changes that occur, they are rapid. And then short period whereby now there is a formation of a what? Of a new species. So that actually explains what is punctuated equilibria. So it is an evolutionary process which involves what? Long periods of time where species do not do what? They do not change, or they change gradually through natural selection. This alternates with what? Short periods of time where there are what? Where there are rapid what? Rapid change. You see here is the rapid what? Here is the rapid change. And whenever you mention that there is change, please do include what? Through natural selection. So it's an evolutionary process which involves long periods of time where species do not do what? Change through natural selection. This alternates with what? Short period of time where there is rapid change through natural selection. And then we now have a short period of time whereby now there is a formation of what? There is a formation of a new species. And after that, you must always come with a what? With a conclusion by stating that a punctuated equilibrium is supported by what? By the absence of transitional fossils indicating the period of rapid change. So that is speciation. And then now we move to the last theory that we are going to look at, which is speciation. And then speciation, it is the formation of a new species. Now we must know how speciation contributes to biodiversity. Ne? So because of a new species is formed, it means that it increases biodiversity. So that is how speciation affects biodiversity. It increases biodiversity because a new species is formed. But the one that decreases biodiversity, it will be what? It will be extinction, because there will be the permanent disappearance of an organism. So it decreases biodiversity. Yes. So speciation, it increases biodiversity. And before we get to speciation, you must know how to define the term species as well as a population. Is it clear? So at this moment, we must know that a species is a group of what? Of organisms, ne? So these organisms, they share what? They share similar, not the same. They share similar characteristics. Again, after sharing similar characteristics, they must be able to do what? To interbreed. And they must produce what? A fertile offspring. If those three factors are not involved within a population, then we would know that in this particular population, there are different species. So how do we know that we are of the same species? We must be able to produce an offspring that is how? That is fertile. I'm going to make an example. We have a donkey and a horse, ne? A donkey and a horse. Those two, they share similar. They are not the same, but they share similar what? Characteristics. Can a donkey and a horse interbreed? Yes. They can interbreed. But is the offspring of a donkey and a horse fertile? No. So is a horse and a donkey same species? Definitely not. So for us to say organisms are of the same species, they must be able to interbreed. They must be able to produce a fertile offspring. So now let us look at, you see it says speciation and extinction and the effect of each. We have already done that. Extinction, it decreases biodiversity, whereas speciation increases biodiversity. So speciation through a geographic isolation, same as Darwinism or natural selection. With this one, you must also know the general theory, and you must also be able to explain, you must be able to explain should an example be given by using application. So this one, very important. It also states if a population of a single species, so majority of the learners, when we mark at the end of the year, they don't write population. They say a species becomes separated by geographical barrier, which is wrong. So it must be a population. Wabona, it's population. You see that population. You see population. Not a what? Not a species. Should you write about a species from the first bullet to the last? It means all those marks will not be credited. Is it clear, ladies and gentlemen? Please let us not make that mistake. We must talk of a what? Of a population. Now, if a single population of a species becomes separated by a geographical barrier, ne, you must mention that by your geographical barrier. It's important that you mention it. Ne? If you don't mention it, you lose a mark. So you must mention that geographical barrier. So the population will then split into two. So it is not all the time where a population will split into two. Ne? It can split into 3, it can split into 4, depending on what is given on the question paper. You must check the number of population that are given on the paper. You will see when we make an example. So because now these populations are separated, it means that there will be no gene flow between the two populations. And after being separated by a barrier, each population, it will be exposed to a different environmental condition, or the selective pressure may be different. So because of them being exposed to different environmental conditions, natural selection occurs how? Independently. That independently is very important. If you just write natural selection occurs and you don't write it occurs independently, no mark will be allocated for that bullet or for that point. And then because now natural selection has occurred, individuals of the two populations, they become very different from each other. And how will they be different? They will be different from each other genotypically and phenotypically. We know genotypically is the genetic makeup, again, whereas phenotypically is the physical appearance. And then even if the two populations were to mix again, they will not be able to do what? To interbreed, because the population are now different. What? Do you see where you write species? The last bullet. It indicates that they are different species. Now, for speciation, you see, we talk of a barrier. You must be able to identify the barrier. Number 2, you must be able to identify the environmental condition. That's what they want you to do. They can say maybe we have in the Galapagos Island, we know that there are different tortoises. We have a tall tortoise and a short one, a dome shape and a little back one. So now, why are they different? It's because they are exposed to different environmental conditions. Why are these ones tall? It's because maybe the type of the food that they eat is available at the top of the trees. Then for this one, maybe the food is where? On the ground. So in an exam, they are going to check if whether you are able to identify the environmental condition. So it means if we talk of those tortoises, when you get here, you will state that the saddleback one is exposed to such an environment where the food is on the ground, and then this one is exposed to food maybe at the top of the trees. So you must be able to identify that. And then again, you see, we say they become different genotypically and phenotypically. You must be able to state the difference. This one is now saddleback shape, and then this one is dome shape. So they would want you to also identify the difference that we can see phenotypically. And then they can state we mix them again, and then when we mix them, they were able to interbreed, but they produced what? An infertile offspring. Then for them producing an infertile offspring, we now know that they are two different species. So now let us quickly go through the example. Our time is almost up. So now here we have what? The Potos and the Lumas. I know you are familiar with this one. Ne? So we say they share a common ancestor that existed where? In Africa. Presently, Potos only occurs in Africa, while the Lumas are only found in Madagascar. So Madagascar is an island of the east coast of Africa as shown in the diagram below. So now when we look at the two, we know Madagascar was once part of Africa, right? And then it became separated by a what? By geographical barrier. What is the geographical barrier in this instant? You must state it's the Indian Ocean. You are not going to say it's the ocean. It is given that it is the Indian Ocean. And please, the geographical barrier, it is not always the sea or the geographic or the what. Ne? Anything that separates a population, we regard it as a what? As a geographical barrier. So they become separated into two populations. What are those two populations? East coast of Africa as well as what? Madagascar. So how many populations do we have here? They separated into two, right? Good. So we will say if a population of a single species, so if Africa, if the original population of the common ancestor of the small mammals of the Potos and the Lumas that existed in what? In Africa, they become what? Separated by the geographical barrier, which is the what? The Indian Ocean. Then after stating that it is the Indian Ocean, then the population splits into two. Then you mention it splits into East Africa and Madagascar. Not just it splits into two. You don't leave it at that. Depending on the information that will be given on the question paper. Then the population splits into two. We have East Africa and Madagascar. There is no gene flow between the two populations in East Africa and Madagascar. Each population will be exposed to different environmental conditions on both sides. Then natural selection occurs how? Independently in the two populations. If there's three, you write three populations, such that the individuals of the two populations become very different from each other, genotypically and phenotypically. Even if the two were to mix again, they will not be able to interbreed to produce what? A fertile offspring. Then the two populations are now different what? Species. Then you mention the name of the two new different what? Species, which is the Potos and the Lumas. Now let us look at this one. There was once one population. Remember, all continents were one. And then they become separated. What will be the geographical barrier? Check. This one is here. The other one is here and the other one is there. What will be the geographical barrier here? It will be the what? The ocean or the sea. So it is not mentioned. But we know these are continents. So what is it? What is it that is between the continents? Is the sea or the what? Or the ocean? And then it splits into how many population? How many populations? You see, it splits into three population. You see now, the three population. And then, hence we have three different what? Three different species, which is the coyote, the jackal, and the dingo. So those are the things that are very important when you come across a question of what? Of speciation. So it is a single population of the dog family. They were separated by the geographical barrier, which is the ocean. Then the population splits into three. You see, it's three. So each population will be exposed to different environmental conditions on the three what? Continents. You just don't leave it at they will be exposed to different environmental conditions. On which? Is it clear? On which environment are we talking about? You must include that in your answer when you do the application. Then each population will be exposed to different environmental condition. Then natural selection occurs how? Independently. You see, they never leave out this word, ne? Independently. So both of them will undergo what? Natural selection. So it occurs independently. And then such that the individuals of the three populations become different genotypically and phenotypically. Remember, you should be able to state their difference. Should you see them or should they mention them in the question paper? Ne? Even if the three were to mix, they will not be able to interbreed to produce a fertile offspring. And then the three population are now different what species, which is the coyote, the jackal, and the dingo. So that is my story for today, ladies and gentlemen. For next week, I will also be here. We will be focusing on human evolution. We will go through the phylogenetic tree, the similarities as well as the differences, and the out of Africa hypothesis. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.